Inside the Plan with the 401k Brothers is a production of Horizon Retirement Plans, a division of Horizon Financial Group. Bill and Andy Bush are indeed brothers, but are not twins. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Inside the Plan with the 401k Brothers. Brother Bill here.
And Brother Andy.
Andy, man, what a crazy year and a half or so we've had on the inflation side of things.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. It's been something that, we haven't seen inflation like that going back to the early 80s is, I guess, when it started to come down. Yeah. But I would say the mid 80s, is where it may have been as high as this.
And so that obviously has caused personal household budgets to shrink in a sense. Your dollar won't go as far.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I was, my two kids are in college and they both have jobs, but man, I think of back when I was in college, many moons ago. This would have been the late 80s. And I just recall, I had jobs too. And seems as though my dollars went a whole heck of a lot further than theirs do, particularly at the grocery store.
Yeah. Well, that's where we're definitely feeling it a lot. Yep. And, it's cooled off some, but even if the inflation numbers cool off, it's not that prices are lowering. It's just that they're not raising
as quickly
or as high.
Exactly.
And so, even this morning, we got some news about inflation, was actually higher than expected.
Yeah.
And that's after it's cooled off a little bit.
Right. Yeah. And so, you're kind of seeing this tug of war, so to speak, between the consumer and those who are selling the goods. And really, the economy has been pretty darn strong, and it's kind of to that point that the consumer's still purchasing, even though prices are going up.
Yeah, and I do think that some of that is consumers using credit more as well.
Yeah, we've definitely seen that in some of the studies. I think J.P. Morgan has put out where obviously in 2020, the year of COVID, nobody could spend as much as they had in the past. And so spending or savings rates were very high, over 15%, I believe, per household on average. And the one just recently, I think it was for 2022, maybe 23, but it was down to 3%.
Yeah.
3% of a household's savings ability. And that's not just retirement savings. That's savings overall.
That's everything.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty low.
And so the inflation story is definitely a part of that.
Yes.
So, we're listeners and followers of Morgan Housel,
yes,
Psychology of Money, and then his new book out.
Same as ever. And then he writes for the Collaborative Fund, blog. And so
he's got a podcast as well. So we listen to him. So he came out with a few thoughts on spending money. So today we're going to talk about spending versus savings and just kind of talk where it takes us, right?
Yeah. And so, part of what he talks about is he's got several points and we'll just kind of elaborate and, add a little maybe color to some of those. But he basically, one of the first things he says, there's two ways to use money. One is as a tool to live a better life, right? Your a standard of living and that kind of a thing. And he says the other is a yardstick of status to measure yourself against others.
Yeah, I think that's where people kind of get over their skis a little bit. Yeah, there's this kind of mindset that I see everybody else kind of in my immediate surroundings have something, therefore I've got to have it too.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before when we've talked about budgeting. Is in budgeting, you want to look at what your needs are, and you obviously need to take care of your needs first, and then your wants. But what happens is it becomes a little cloudy, right? You need transportation to get from your house to your place of employment, but do you need a top line vehicle or just a vehicle to get you there. And so, the want side of that need is I want to get this certain brand or this, the certain model. And because, Joe Blow down the street has one or, my buddy over there does. And so yeah, you do have to balance that. I think, living a better life. Absolutely. Just recently having a conversation with my wife and I was like, I don't want to have to keep up with our landscaping anymore. I'm kind of tired of it. And I enjoy doing that work, but I just feel like my time is compressed. And so I want to enjoy spending my time in other ways. And so I can pay for somebody else to do that for me.
Yeah.
And so that's a better life.
I came across this quote from Warren Buffett.
Oh, I've heard of him.
Yeah, who said that, the quote is, do not save what is left after spending, but spend what is left after saving.
Yeah,
So
that's a good
making
quote.
saving the priority. Easier said than done.
Yeah.
But still that's sage advice.
Yeah, and I think on that second side of that first comment that Morgan Housel said, and kind of to the point of what Warren Buffett said, is, if you're using your money as a status, as some sort of status to measure yourself against others, you can very well get to where money is not a tool that can be used, but is actually using you and controlling you. And that kind of goes into that psychology side. One of the things that in his podcast on spending, Morgan talks about is he says that there's the psychology of money and then there's the science of money, right? So the psychology of spending and the science of it. And I tell people often when they ask, I'm like, hey, financial planning in general, as a general theme, is just math. That's all it is. And that's kind of easy. But it's that the mindsets and the psychology and the emotions, those are the hard parts of having a very successful financial life.
Yeah.
And you've got to get your arms around that. And that's just between your two ears. It has really nothing to do with the other people that are out there. It's, are you living according to your values, and are you allowing the influence of any and everybody else to dictate how you spend your money?
Mm-hmm. Another point that he kind of makes is, and we've talked about this before, is how you spend your money, is sort of a reflection of what you've experienced in life, particularly early in life.
Yep.
And we've talked many times on the podcast about our upbringing, in southern rural Indiana. And, family of 6 kids, there were some lean times, and I think that sticks with you.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, in a lot of ways, those of you who can remember the Waltons, the Depression era, big family, that kind of just found a way to make things work and live life. That's kind of how we were a little bit, in Indiana. And it's I would say it's not that to say we've overcome that or we're above that, but we've grown beyond it. We've grown out of it, And so I think that's part of it is, we talked the other day on an interview Bill and I gave about that upbringing. And I said, man, if I see a penny or a quarter on the ground, I'm picking it up.
Oh, that's right.
Because I actually, I grew up that way where coins were valuable. Right. And man, if I had a quarter and I had a dollar bill, I could go get a pack of baseball cards or, gum or whatever, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so those kinds of things, we didn't have a lot of extra dollars when we were growing up. And so I valued every bit of it.
Yeah. Another one, spending money can buy happiness in some regards. It can, but it's not, it's often an indirect path, not a direct, hey, I bought this and now I feel great. Sometimes it takes a little time.
Yeah, I think there's kind of that immediate elation and excitement about buying something new. I certainly have felt it, but that is a very fleeting emotion, and so to that point, you're talking about, you can do some things that might give you some freedom and independence, autonomy, control of your time. Like I was talking about, hey, paying someone else to do a chore that I might be able to free my time up to do maybe a hobby or something else that I like. You know?
So quick quiz here then.
Yeah.
So in let's call it the last 3 or 4 years, what has something that you've spent your money on that made you happy? Give us an example.
I would say, I mean, probably the first thing that comes to mind is I play tennis,
Mhm.
and so in October of 2020, Heather and I joined a racket club in town,
Gotcha.
and I spend money on that on a monthly basis and go play. And I've created a lot of new friendships,
Mm.
and it's not at all a thing where I pay that bill and feel regret.
Yeah, you
I
get
always, I
enjoyment out of
always,
it.
always feel good about it. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I think in my
Bill,
case,
please.
yeah, is it's coming up on 2 years ago now. We took a trip to England and Germany. We
Yeah,
have an older brother that lives in
we
Germany, and
do.
that was part of the trip to visit him for 4 or 5 days. And then my wife is a big Anglophile, I think that's correct,
I
and she
don't know.
loves England, and so we went
Okay.
over there and toured around, and it was something we saved up for, and it was one of those things that, we're gonna look back on that trip quite a bit and just an enjoyable time. And so that brought us happiness.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think I can't remember if it was Morgan Housel saying this. Yeah, he did. He said every dollar of savings buys you this claim check on the future, meaning
Mhm.
you can cash it in, right?
Yeah.
And so there's that aspect of it's not just spending. Spending and savings are kind of one and the same in the sense that they're the more you spend on this side, the less you're able to save,
Yeah.
or vice versa, the less you're spending, the more you're able to save. And it just gives you that capability of down the road putting it towards something more useful. One of the things, and this just a little tangent here, Bill. One of the things I've thought of as I've gotten older and talking about the emotion of spending and some of the psychology of it is, I don't do this all the time. I'm not always mindful of it, but when I'm going to spend money, probably on something that's a little higher in price, is I think to myself, is that something I'm going to be using in a year? Is that
Mhm.
something that I'm going to be using in 3 years and 5 years? And try to think of the longevity of whatever that those dollars are going into. It's very easy to do that, when you're going to buy something to eat, that you're just going to fill your
Yeah.
belly,
Right,
right?
right, right.
And but when it comes to some of the other stuff, like clothes, am I going to really be wearing that in a year, or is that just for this one thing, one trip? And
Mhm.
then when I do that, it makes me not want to waste the money, so
Mm.
to speak,
Right.
on this one thing.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this along the every dollar of savings, kind of get you that claim check for the future.
Hmm.
The opposite of that is every dollar in debt
Mm.
is a claim that someone else has on your future, because
That's
that's a
well,
dollar you
that's
owe,
yeah.
you
There's no
know.
doubt about that.
And
Yeah.
so, again, as we're talking about savings versus spending, that's a good
Yeah,
point.
and I mean, man, debt is definitely certain types of debt. When I was younger and in my early upcomings in career and building a family, starting a family, man, we had some credit card debt, and it was just suffocating,
Yeah.
and it limited you. When I think I would say we kind of bought into, oh, the credit card gives us freedom to spend the way we want to
Mhm.
spend. Yeah, the truth is it might give you that at that moment, but down the road you're indebted to that,
Yeah.
whatever that payment is, and that limits you, if you ever want to get out of it. If
Yeah.
you want to not get out of it ever, well, then you're just going to go through a cycle of paying it down some and then building it back up, and paying it down and building it back up. And
Yeah.
that doesn't feel good.
And credit card interest rates are 20 plus.
Yeah, oh yeah, right now they certainly are.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we encourage folks to, obviously, if you're going to use a credit card, and there's nothing wrong with using it, pay it off every month.
A few other points to make here. One of the things he talks about is nothing is as desired as much as the thing you want but can't have.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
that's so true.
Yeah, that's, go to that the book, The Power of Influence by Richard Cialdini, I think his name is.
Mhm.
He says one of those six tenets of influence is scarcity.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and that's pretty much what that is, there's well, I guess we won't talk about that particular thing, but if you have a company that only provides a certain amount of things, or for a certain time that creates scarcity and a bigger desire from
Yeah.
people. And so it's kind of crazy psychology there.
We're going to pick out a couple more here. We encourage you to kind of look up some of this on your own, but I like this one. There's a difference between nice stuff and fancy stuff.
Yeah.
And I think he uses the example of, hey, a high-end Toyota has some nice bells and whistles, might be better than an entry-level BMW.
Yeah, there's no
in terms
doubt.
of what you're paying for it and all that. And just from my personal experience, I think the last 3 vehicles, maybe 4, that we purchased in our family were not new. They
Mhm.
were almost new.
Yeah.
Kind of the one owner, low miles, and you get a better price and, shop around and see what the choices out there.
Yeah, and I think kind of that the everything is relative to someone else is a good view too, because I mean it's kind of the like he says about the Toyota, the high end Toyota versus the entry level B or any other luxury car you can think of is you're getting a pretty nice car on the Toyota, and how much more do you need really? And so it does become you're buying for a status.
And
bragging.
then, the other thing is there is this sliding scale and kind of almost like who are you comparing things with
Mhm.
in the sense that there's no objective level of wealth.
Yeah.
I think I've seen this in terms of, big league baseball salaries.
Yeah.
Being, Mike Trout's contract is this and he gets paid this so many per pitch or whatever. But you compare that to,
Well, compare it to Warren Buffett.
Warren Buffett.
Warren
Yeah.
Buffett, and just in dividends alone, I believe, if I recall, on a quarterly basis, I could be wrong, but he makes more in dividends alone from his wealth than Mike Trout makes in a year.
Yeah. So you
Or his
probably
contract.
you've
like
probably
that.
seen the same
Yeah.
same reference. So
So the comparison thing, and I think in this podcast at some point he talks about that is comparison. It can be good, but you've heard that quote: "Comparison is the root of all is the thief of all joy."
Yeah.
Comparison is the thief of all joy, and his point is, yeah, not always, because if you're comparing yourself against someone who doesn't have as good of a lifestyle as you, well, you might feel better about where you are or thankful and have gratitude about it. If you're comparing yourself against somebody who's have much more, it might make you feel like you're not enough and you're no good or whatever. And so I would say, comparison can be good, it can be bad, but the truth is have gratitude, be thankful about where you are, what you have, and where you're trending in life, if that's the place you want to trend. We always want folks to trend in a very healthy financial position, and kind of the same with your physical health, right? Is do good, be a good steward of your body, be a good steward of your money.
Yeah, I think when you do comparisons and it can be aspirational in a sense of like,
Sure.
and motivational, that's a good way. But sometimes that behavior is hard to control when you say, oh man,
Yeah.
you see things that you really might be out of grasp.
I guess it's the difference between being envious of somebody, right, versus being thankful that that person's achieved what they've achieved and you are where you are, and but always try to motivate yourself. But yeah, there's obviously a lot more we could talk about when it comes to spending. That is a very important part of your life and your journey financially, is making sure that you have that balance. I mean, everybody's got to. I say this often with our group plan or with our retirement plans when we talk to the groups. Is you've got a balance of what you're saving for retirement and what you're spending now. It's the balance of enjoying the here and now
Right.
versus the saving for the future. You don't want to jeopardize your future by only spending now, but you also don't necessarily want to jeopardize your now by only saving for the future. And so, because none of us know when the last grain of sand goes through the hourglass, when we take our last breath. And so, and you only get to go around life once.
Yeah.
And so enjoy it, but don't don't jeopardize your future because you're enjoying it so much now.
Yeah, I've been listening to some, as I get older, Andy.
Oh, you do?
Listening to like, healthy lifestyle and living longer and healthier. And so one of the concepts that's mentioned a couple times in some of the books is the concept of hormesis.
Oh,
and that is applying a stressor. So exercise would be a good example. You're stressing your body. Now, if you did way too much of it, of course, that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
But the body responds to these small stressors and improves, right?
Yeah.
And the outcome is actually improved. And so that's kind of a medical term, But I think of that in terms of savings. Do enough to where it kind of hurts a little bit.
Yeah.
And the outcome will hopefully be good down the line. If, like you said, if you're doing it way too much, you're really sacrificing the now.
Yeah.
And that could hurt way too much. So
yeah. And there's a quote, and gosh, I'm going to try to find it while we're sitting here talking along those lines. There's a guy that just, this is from the book. I heard the quote in the book, Your Best Year Ever by Michael Hyatt. And it's something to the effect, there's a guy that says Western culture has it wrong. They are always seeking comfort instead of challenge or, what do you call it? Hermesis. That little bit of a stressor. And he says, because once we get comfortable, our guard is down and we're no longer have this edge about us. And that comfort life is really not what we want. What we want is the challenge. We want the challenge of competing. We want the challenge. And that's tough to do from time to time. You lose energy, right? As the older I get, and I don't know if you knew I was getting old.
I did not.
Yeah, I am. And, sometimes I wake up and it's a challenge to get energy, to get moving on whatever the task may be. And so I think it's important that we always try to have those little bits of stressors, and you could do that with the way you spend in sacrificing buying something that might be lavish or extra by buying something a little, lower than that. That's still maybe a need or something that you want and you have the capability of paying for, but you just don't do the lavish.
Yeah. There you go. Well, those are some thoughts on savings and
thoughts.
spending. Yeah. If you'd like to reach out to us and further the conversation, you can reach out to me, Bill Bush, at bbush@horizonfg.com.
Or you can reach out to me, Andy Bush, at abush@horizonfg.com. That's a system.
That is definitely a system. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of Inside the Plan with the 401k Brothers. I'm Brother Bill.
And I'm Brother Andy.
We are brothers,
but not twins.
The opinions of the hosts and guests of this podcast are for general information purposes only and are not to be construed as specific advice or recommendations for any individual. You should consult with a qualified financial professional to determine what is appropriate for you. The advisors of Horizon Financial Group offer securities and advisory services through Cetera Advisors, member FINRA SIPC. Cetera Advisors is under separate ownership from any other named entity. Horizon Financial Group, 8280 YMCA Plaza Drive, Building 5, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 70810. Advisors of Horizon are registered representatives of Cetera Advisors, a broker-dealer and registered investment advisor.